We have moved from strategic restraint to strategic resolve.
Unlike Kargil, unlike Balakot, unlike Uri, this time the operations took place across the entire length of the line of control and the international border.
Normally a country has an army. In the case of Pakistan, the army has a country.
There's political Pakistan, there's army Pakistan, and there are people of Pakistan. I've been to Pakistan, I've been to Lahore, and they want to come back to India.
If we are determined never to get onto the negotiating table, as Vice Admiral Luthra is also saying, how will we resolve the pesky issues? After the horrific Pahalgam attack, Operation Sindoor was launched to target terror bases in Pakistan after multi-agency intelligence reports that came about these terror infrastructure. These were precision strikes. Missiles and drones were used as part of this operation, and following that, of course, we know the entire sequence, a ceasefire was called, and both countries are now at a very different juncture than what we were with Pakistan before Operation Sindoor. We will discuss about the operational details, the military and the diplomatic deterrence. We will also go into the psychology of war. We definitely want to talk about the international outreach and the way forward. With me is my colleague Anushka Jagtiani, consulting editor of Free Press Journal.
Thanks, Afrida. Yes, many defense analysts say with Operation Sindoor, a new chapter begins in India's fight against Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. We have moved from strategic restraint to strategic resolve. With us, we have a very esteemed panel to discuss the operation, the doctrine of deterrence, and the way forward. We have Vice Admiral Girish Luthra, a retired Indian Navy officer who served as the flag officer commanding-in-chief of the Western Naval Command from 2016 to 2019. Dr. Harish Shetty, renowned psychiatrist who has authored articles on the psychological impact of war, and Sanjay Jha, well-known political analyst and author. Thank you so much for joining us.
And welcome all of you. Thanks so much for making time for us.
Thank you.
I want to begin with you, Vice Admiral Girish Luthra, that let's get an overview, your assessment and your appreciation of Operation Sindoor in terms of the targets, the timing and the severity.
Well, Operation Sindoor was very different from all earlier military operations undertaken in the Indo-Pak context. It was, as you know, very intense, very compressed in time frame, just about 88 hours of total duration of operation. It required interagency coordination, jointness, unlike any other operation before. And overall, I would say that the Indian Armed Forces achieved the objectives that were set for them by the government. There were many firsts in this case. Also, if you look at any military operation, it is important to look at both the offensive side of the operations and the defensive side of the operations. If you look at only one, perhaps you are not getting the complete picture. And if you look at both the offensive and the defensive picture, you find that offensive, as you mentioned, the attacks carried out on the terrorist bases and the associated infrastructure at the start of Operation Sindoor, and subsequently at the air bases and associated facilities across the length and breadth. Now, when I say across the length and breadth, it is once again important to note that unlike Kargil, unlike Balakot, unlike Uri, this time the operations took place across the entire length of the line of control and the international border over a compressed time frame. Earlier, you see, these were operating in limited geographies. This time it was on a much broader front that it took place. And as far as defensive operations are concerned, I think the Indian Armed Forces did extremely well in defensive operations. You see, offensive operations always catch the limelight and they are generally discussed more. But defensive operations are equally challenging, if not more, because they require alertness, they require you to be operating round the clock and fending off any attacks that are coming at you. And so therefore, with all the drones and all the other few missiles that were sent in, bringing them down and not letting them get through was a major success on the defense side, which was not the case on the Pakistani side. On the Pakistani side, the defenses were weak and the Indian attacks got through with precision, which did not happen on our side. So I think on the whole, the operations were well executed by the armed forces at the operational level and also at the tactical level. Going forward, after any military operation, both militaries assess how the operations went, they look at lessons learnt, and I'm sure this time will not be any
I want
different.
to come to a contrast of the two countries in life, since you said the military operated as per the government's directions. Now, there's a very different dynamic in Pakistan. But Anushka, first you go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. Like you said, this definitely marks a shift, and Operation Sindoor carried out its deepest strikes inside Pakistani territory since 1971. We know about that. Um, about coming to the ceasefire element of it, did you expect it to happen when it did happen? Do you feel that because opinion is divided on this. We saw many defense analysts say, no, we shouldn't have gone in for a ceasefire. We had the upper hand, we should have continued. What is your view on that?
See, as far as upper hand is concerned, I think the government of India made it clear that they were not, their objective was not a decisive victory over Pakistan military. That because the government kept emphasizing that we do not want to escalate any further. Our objective was to strike the terrorist infrastructure, which we have done, and therefore we do not want to. So therefore there was no intention of going further right from the beginning. And so therefore the view that we should have pressed home the advantage and continued with this does not align well with that thought process, that the objective itself was limited to the terrorist infrastructure to begin with. But yes, it happened a little earlier than what I was expecting, but ceasefire was a given and it had to come sooner or later. And also what was a given was somebody facilitating or mediating or playing a participative role, because given the relationship between India and Pakistan at this juncture, a third party involvement would have been necessary to come to a ceasefire.
Yeah. Sanjay, I want to bring you in on this point about, when the Prime Minister made his speech and he said that I have given the Defence Forces a free hand. There was a reason why that had to be said, right? Because when you look at our neighbor, there is no such context of free hand even required for the Pak military. Here you are dealing with a military which is on its own.
Free for all. There is a very popular maxim with regards to Pakistan. They say normally a country has an army. In the case of Pakistan, the army has a country. So, it is a fact. It dominates the entire security architecture and frankly the entire governance of the country. Even an elected prime minister survives depending upon the whims of the army. So here is, and if you look at the current predicament of Pakistan, you have a popularly elected Imran Khan in jail, and that's the reality of Pakistan. But there are a couple of points, and I think he's made some very valid points, the Admiral. Let me add a couple to that. I do believe that the announcement of the ceasefire did take everybody by surprise. Not the timing per se alone, but the fact that it was being done by the President of the United States. I think it's unprecedented, frankly, not just from our past experience of our cross-border conflicts or wars with Pakistan, but I can understand that there is a back-channel intermediation or involvement. It has happened even before. In 2019, it's happened during the time of Kargil. You go back several decades. But here is the fundamental point. Trump seemed to know beforehand that there was a ceasefire in the offing.
He was the first to announce
He
it
was the
on the
first to
social
announce
media
it,
platform.
and well, you can't blame him for that. Call him unpredictable, irrational, unstable. All of that is true, but he did mention categorically that listen, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio were on the hotlines with both the governments. So I was a little astonished and, to be honest, disappointed, because this announcement should have ideally come from our own government or our own foreign secretary or the DGMOs. So, I think that's a critical aspect, because it went
it moves
further
away
than that.
from our stated foreign policy, you feel, where it is
I think it's a deviation,
Yeah.
because if you read into the further fine print, there were certain statements made. I mean, again, rather belatedly, our MEA has denied them, but he did mention that we will talk about Kashmir. There was also a mention about the fact that At a neutral site, we will discuss a broad range of issues. I think all this has resulted in this conversation that you're hearing right now, is that has Pakistan and India become hyphenated all over again? I want to throw a little, point of discussion during this conversation today. The bigger worry might be that has India become too hyphenated with the United States? Because it has never happened before that a country with our kind of, not just our democratic or economic or our military stature, I think we should have been more decisive here in deciding. We decided when we are going to attack Pakistan. We should have also decided when to call it off and not even give the perception that this was a call that was finally brokered, and that is the word being used. It's a typical American business term. I've been part of an American bank, so I'll tell you, broking a deal, I thought that was a little unsavory for
Also
us
because
to
you put
digest.
India and Pakistan at par,
Yeah.
and Anushka and me discussed it, the way you spoken
Yeah.
about as if you're at par and there's a
Yeah.
equivalence made saying both countries,
Yeah.
whereas we don't want to be
Yeah.
equated with Pakistan, a terror sponsor.
Yeah, and Afrida, I think here is the point that I would like to mention at the very beginning. Yes, we attacked their terror infrastructure, which we all know is very widespread in Pakistan, but we have to be honest to ourselves. Have we destroyed Jaish-e-Mohammed? Have we destroyed Lashkar-e-Taiba? It's a very difficult thing. Mostly, and I'm sure as an expert, maybe you will agree with me here, if you were to do that operation, it will mostly have to be a covert operation. And end of day, I think, yes, it was a message to Pakistan, categorical. It was necessary that after what happened at Pahalgam, that there would be a military reprisal for what you did, which is we are capable of destroying your infrastructure should it lead to that. So that messaging, I think, has gone through very categorically. Where we got to look within, which is equally important, let's not get carried away. I'm glad we are not a TV channel and three of us are not wearing military uniform and talking about, suddenly being in Karachi, Islamabad and Rawalpindi.
The sea view background,
Yeah,
unlike
yeah,
your
yeah.
other
It's more
green
serene and cloudy. Here is the point, that we got to go back to the fundamentals. The fundamentals are what? Number one, that why did Pahalgam happen? That's a trigger for everything that's happened, right? We should worry about the security lapse. We should worry about the intelligence failures, because if you see, everyone who knows defense will tell you that no matter how formidable is your counter-insurgency capabilities, a terror attack can still happen. So if you go back, Uri happened and we did a surgical strike. That didn't stop Pulwama from happening, did it? And we did Balakot. And still Pahalgam has happened and we have done a strike. What is the assurance that you have that you can actually prevent it at 100%? Nobody can guarantee that. No government can guarantee it. But there has to be a certain robustness with your intelligence, which means your ability to be very well entrenched with the common people, especially in Jammu and Kashmir and the border areas. And secondly, that you do need a very constant vigil in terms of what's going on at the border. Now here, the big worry that I have is that two terrorists, apparently two joined locally, but two terrorists walked into our borders, and by the way, into South Kashmir. This is not at the border. I was in Pahalgam, by the way, 48 hours before the massacre happened. And I can tell you that, and I'm being honest about it, whether it was tourists and nobody expected that, frankly, even I think that is a stretch, because we all know what had happened in Jammu earlier. So there was no real security that I could visibly see.
But then how much can you militarize a region? You want tourism
It's a
to
tourist
be back.
destination.
On this point that after Uri, after Balakot, an incident still happens. You see, the one important thing is that, and we will talk about deterrence a little bit, but deterrence against terrorism will always have a shelf life. It is not something that you can achieve in sort of,
It's always working.
there is no permanence in that deterrence. Whether
even against Naxalites.
Yeah. So therefore your steps and so therefore all these that you just mentioned, these are what is commonly called as deterrence by punishment. There is deterrence
Punitive
by
action.
punitive action, and there is deterrence by denial. you deny through security, through other arrangements. You know, we are 2016, 19 and now that space has been opened up by India.
Yeah,
Let's
so
take opening
absolutely.
comments from Dr.
So I just want to comment that you're right, as you said, Vice Admiral, that Sindoor suggests that the space for conventional operations below the nuclear threshold has expanded. How much is expanded? I mean, that's another point of discussion. But I just like to draw in Dr. Shetty here on deterrence, right? In the context of Operation Sindoor, how has India leveraged the principle of deterrence not just as military strategy, but as a psychological tool to shape enemy behavior?
I think what is important to understand is after every victory in a big cricket match, there is euphoria, there's joy, lasts for a very short time and it dies. Remember, India is an angst-driven world with shorter memories. Do you know what happened after Hathras? We have forgotten, completely forgotten. So this is extremely important for the Indians to move away from all the distractions and feel good that India is strong, India has arrived, India cannot be taken for granted. At the same time, the grief of Pahalgam has been there in the minds of Indians. Kuch karna padega, kuch karna chahiye, and that I think has been achieved partially because nobody believed that the ceasefire would happen. Everybody was talking about POK, everybody was talking of giving Pakistan the biggest punishment, but that doesn't happen in politics. So that is one. Second important point which we should always see is we have shed blood constantly and across many years we have not really seen India to be strong deterrent. I don't think any deterrence happens in Pakistan. I don't think, because see, even yesterday when a terrorist was killed, they are going to give him a state funeral, or they gave him a state funeral. For them, it is the truth, it is the belief that this is the way they have to fight. Though there would be a lot of moderates, but they have no voice. In India, it is aha, eureka, acha hua, or marna chahiye. But remember, Indian memory in a globalized world is very short. They'll forget it very soon. If there's another calamity which hits India very badly, they're going to say all this was rubbish.
I want to take you up on the point you made for Pakistan. You're saying there can be no deterrence. What do you mean by that? Because we do understand there's a religious ideology at play. There's
political
systematic
Pakistan,
radicalization of youth.
No, there's political Pakistan, there's army Pakistan, and there are people of Pakistan. I've been to Pakistan, I've been to Lahore, and they want to come back to India. They want to come to Mumbai. The common man, his khatirdari for an Indian is huge. But then the Punjabi army Pakistan, the political Pakistan, and the jihadis which have increased would always say that for them this is less. Jihad will continue. The concept of jihad, which actually means something very different, has to be changed. I think lastly, all groups which espouse violence use ideology or religion in a very disastrous way. I think that is something we cannot break. For us, I would tell all Indians, you do your work every day, improve our GDP, improve our economy, improve and compete with the world that we are better than the rest, and leave other things to the government or the army. But that goal should not be espoused. This is not going to give us permanent aha or a eureka. Yeah. This is temporary, it will be forgotten after some time.
If I can add to what Dr. Shetty said, see, we have to recognize that exporting terror to India is part of Pakistan's foreign policy. Okay, I mean, if you go deeper into it, in the Pakistan acronym, they think K stands for Kashmir. So this is their bleeding by 1,000 cut strategy for a long time. And I think Pakistan has, if you think about the terror infrastructure, why is it difficult to even obliterate it on a covert operation? Because it's interspersed all over, in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and within Pakistan. And not everything is going to be available for an aerial attack. So, and moreover, there are ways and means to regroup that. So I think we got to recognize that listen, the infrastructure of terror in Pakistan has got funding happening in a very formal sense by the ISI, and they have their own mechanism to beat the entire international supervision. So I think, one of the aspects that I think, I would love to be very honest about it, Dr. Manmohan Singh's government got a lot of criticism from people, and I have been part of the Congress, I'll tell you, as to why didn't you do this big counter strike against Pakistan after the horrific 26/11 terror attacks that happened in Mumbai. But people don't give him and his government credit for successfully isolating Pakistan diplomatically. Something that has become a big issue in this particular thing, where you find that India really hasn't had too many big international players standing up for you. Look at the Financial Action Task Force. Pakistan was in the grey list, is now out of it. I would have expected India to actually be aggressively lobbying for that. Pakistan today, technically, there's an admission made by the international organizations that there is no terror financing in Pakistan, which we know to be wrong.
Yes.
Now, where is our diplomacy happening there? And I think, as somebody rightly raised a question, today the United States, and I keep coming back to it, you have to watch US very, very
Carefully.
circumspectly. Exactly. Because it's the US probably which doesn't want Pakistan to be under the FATF, because it would like it to get the IMF loan, which would not have happened had the US not backed it. India, by the way, abstained from it. I wonder why. And I think the bottom line is that you have to figure out ways and means to weaken that terror infrastructure, which you may not be able to do through military or through covert operations. Starve it of international kind of funding. Make sure that tomorrow Pakistan actually faces huge economic sanctions, so that at the end of the day it recognizes that the existential problem is about looking after its people and not about exporting terror to India and earlier towards Afghanistan.
Yeah, so that brings us to the next round, actually, on the international outreach that is happening. I'll take your comments first before I go to Sanjay. I know he's written a lot about it. Do you think militarily, the deterrence we spoke about, now diplomatically, what is it that India can do? And this particular delegation of multi-party MPs reaching out to various countries, can it implore those countries to achieve what Sanjay is saying, that, why don't you grey list them? Why are you extending the largest from IMF? Do we have that bargaining power?
See, firstly, war is at the strategic level. Warfare is at the operational level. And when we talk about war, there is a term called DIME. And DIME stands for diplomatic, informational, M is for military, E is for economic. All four aspects come into play, and you have to use all four levers in a war situation, or in a war or war-like situation. In a short war like 4 days, the economic sort of actions and their impact cannot be achieved, because it's too short a period to apply economic levers. In the past there used to be trade embargoes and other things, but in 4 days you can't achieve those economic levers in 4 days. Although you can say that yes, Indus Water Treaty being held in abeyance is in a way an economic instrument also being applied, which is now, because the Indian government's approach now is, Indus Water Treaty is one example, that it is expanding beyond the military domain and bringing in other aspects to tighten the noose, call it squeeze, or whatever term you want to use. On your specific question about diplomacy and international outreach, see, international outreach firstly is a continuous process and should be a continuous process. It's not one-off that happens before or after an incident. It is supposed to be actually a continuous process. Now the government has decided to send 7 delegations to different countries, covering a large number of countries with members of parliament. In each group there is a diplomat as well. Now we have to give it some time. At present, while the government, it's not a good idea to, in the beginning only, to be dismissive about it. We need not be dismissive about it from the point of view of hyphenation. Now, why do I say that? I say that because while we want to do an outreach and get the world to agree to our point of view, but if we overdo it, then we are also bringing in the same rehyphenation that everybody is talking about. We are again getting caught in this dilemma of rehyphenation or break away from the Pakistan syndrome and get into a larger, when we talk about the Indo-Pacific, when we talk about China, we talk about global, the global south, the international bodies, governing bodies, the multilateralism, the various bodies, that the reform process that is underway. So when we position ourselves at the global level and at the regional level, at the Indo-Pacific level, and then if we keep going back on this excessive outreach as far as Pakistan, then we face this dilemma of rehyphenation.
So
we should
really,
get
yeah,
Dr.
we need a
Shetty on the
fine
dilemma.
balance is what you're saying. Excessive outreach is not the answer.
But
You get
yeah,
clumped
you
with
have to find
Pakistan
a
again.
balance. But outreach is a continuous process. You know, it should be a continuous process.
Yeah, and you know, diplomacy, as you said, is also an extension of war.
And therefore, that is all diplomacy.
There are
Yeah.
mind games involved, Anushka.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, mind games. Coming again now, the diplomatic outreach also represents a psychological component, proving to the world that India acted justly and decisively. Is it as important as tactical victory, Dr. Shetty?
Well, I'm not an expert in diplomacy nor victory, but one thing is sure, the Indian ethos always says, हम जाके सभी को सच बताएंगे और सच सब सुनने वाले हैं, but सच कोई सुनता नहीं है. The point is there are layers and variables which makes the West not support India, and it has a long.
Is it because Pakistan is a counterbalance to
Not
India?
not
Sorry, I'm
essentially. Well, K. Subramaniam, an ex-defense analyst who's no more, wrote a beautiful article in the Times of India during the 9/11, and the last words were the most important. There he said that America did not ever believe that terror could strike their own shores, and they started fiddling with countries, entering countries, bombing civilians, saying that apne tak ye sab nahi aayega. But he said, will they ever learn? And the last sentence was, they will never learn because that is the nature of the beast. The point I want to make is, it's good that you go and talk about yourself, but don't appear so weak that you need to explain everybody. Israel never asks anybody. Okay, but at the point, I think now we are slowly coming out of our slavery. I mean, if you look at important variables, Ganguly coming late for the toss, Ganguly gave spine to the Indian team. Sehwag did not bother who was the bowler. He used to hit people left, right and center. The young Indian is slowly removing the yoke of slavery, which remained after 1947 for a long time. So across all borders, we want to assert, and that assertion is happening in all forms. Irrespective of who's in the government, that will happen. But the point is, Indians are naive. They have no guile collectively. That's why we were enslaved for a very long time. And it's important to understand that a large number of countries don't want India to be very strong. They don't want India and China to come together. If India and China comes together, we can dictate to the world. So you may have Trump, but the deep state is always alive. You may have Trump, but he is interested in America, and he is very unpredictable. So I think the exercise of going across would please Indians कि हम जाके सबको सच बता रहे हैं, ये बताना चाहिए, this is the right thing to do. But the point is, I don't understand how much impact it will have. As Sir said beautifully, we need to be very proactive in our answers to the world continuously during peacetime. It's like calling a psychiatrist to a school when there's one suicide. Ad hoc basis. You can't do anything with that. You have to build your systems against suicide and building mental health in the school. Same India. But I would like to say that the people of India also have to be pleased by the government, and all this also has an impact. हम कुछ कर रहे हैं, and people are very angry at the ceasefire, by the way. Ask anybody, rich, poor, old, young, village or town, itna jaldi kyun ceasefire? And that also plays in the minds of the politicians.
I want to add a point to that actually. It's an interesting point that Dr. Shetty made. First and foremost, I think let's be real. There is America is no longer invested in this region because Afghanistan is no longer America's interest at all. And to that extent, if you hear Donald Trump casually talking about a 1,000-year-old war, where he said they will sort it out amongst
Needs
themselves.
a history lesson.
J.D. Vance is on record to say it's none of our business, right?
Absolutely.
Now, what does it tell you? That for America, this is nothing but one transactional conflict happening between two old adversaries, thanks to the British, and now let them learn to live with it. Simple as that, right? Don't forget that Trump wanted to create a French Riviera at Gaza. So, you know, they have a very different model. And India needs to be aware of that. I think that, to my mind, is a risk that you cannot take. Yes, America has technology, it has a lot of business, but India is an attractive market, which is why the world looks at you. Simple as that. The other point is, you know, you're right. I mean, there is an aspirational India. But you know, there is a risk between aspiration and a fine line to arrogance. And I'll tell you where I am slightly worried. And I wrote that actually. If you look at this delegation, it's interesting that the government of India under Mr. Modi did not think it pertinent that the delegation goes to Bangladesh, to Sri Lanka, to Myanmar, to your immediate
Nepal,
neighborhood.
yeah.
And I am worried, and I would love to hear the Admiral's views on that, that this entire area has actually got a massive Chinification happening. You know, we can go into details, but probably we don't have the time for that. And I think today, you know, are we being seen by a lot of our SAARC friends of the past as being the big regional bully that has emerged? We are the only G20 country, we are a bigger economy, but you know, are we handling these issues with the sensitivity deserved? In my opinion, the biggest foreign policy disaster has been the way we have handled Bangladesh, which frankly speaking, I mean, India can say with pride that we liberated a part of that East Pakistan, which was under a brutal authoritarian regime. And today that Bangladesh should turn hostile to you, and you know, we are countering that back. How does it make us into the real regional player with dominance? Now, it can't come through arrogance. I'm sorry to say that. And you know, I've been seeing a lot of tweets happening, boycott Turkey, boycott Azerbaijan. I think a delegation should have gone to Turkey and to Azerbaijan. You know, I'll tell you why I'm saying that. You know, there are a lot of these right-wing zealots who are saying, no more tourists to Turkey. Fair enough, you know, I mean, people boycotted Tesla because of his Elon Musk's politics. But what is the truth? There are 3.5 lakh tourists from India who go to Turkey. Turkey gets 51 million tourists a year. So your number is 0.06%. Fair enough, dent it, no problem. But you know, I think we need to grow up in the way we handle our politics. And I think the government has a big role here. So I want to end by, from my side, one line, that Colonel Sofia Qureshi was there along with Wing Commander Vyomika Singh and Vikram Mishri in a very dignified way handling the press briefings. I just feel that I sincerely hope, because you have seen some of the comments made by certain politicians, that we recognize the beauty and the diversity of our own country. The strength of this country is the fact that 3 of us are sitting. I haven't met both these eminent gentlemen before. Whether we agree, disagree or whatever, we are passionate people who love our country and want to see it grow well, strong, but most importantly, united at all times. And I think if we can carry that message down and make it a part of our lives, which it should be, frankly, India won't need anybody's validation and we will do well.
Yeah, I want
Very well said.
Just
Yeah.
quickly one point. From inspiration, you go to arrogance, but then the pendulum swings into the middle, and that is important. From inferiority to superiority, but then it swings. Second is, Bangladesh is not about Bangladesh. All over the world, we have Islamic uprising, even in countries of Europe, where immigrants are really saying, yahan Sharia hoga, yahan ye hoga. UK is in a mess. So it's important to attack the Ummah across by all the countries. Not selectively, that this is our liberal democracy. This is something I will not expect, or I will not really believe it to happen. It can't happen in my country. So Bangladesh, I think we failed because diplomatically also we failed. We didn't hold them together. But the point is, this risk of terrorism is not about India and Pakistan.
No, so I think that's the point Sanjay is making. If you have a hostile neighborhood,
it's across the world.
there is only so much you can do. If everybody else is against you and you have not made an attempt to reach out to them first.
No, I agree with that. India should
take care of your backyard.
India should have
why are we
sent
sending
to
a delegation?
Bangladesh, Nepal, I would say also to Pakistan and Ceylon and Turkey, nothing, we should do it. We should not keep them out.
Okay, closing round. I had one question to Dr. Shetty based on an interesting article that you've written on how Operation Sindoor symbolizes that sort of a civilizational awakening and a breakaway from a previous pattern, breaking out of the Stockholm syndrome. If
I
you
think
could just comment
every
on that.
civilization awakens after it is subjugated for a long time. I mean, let me say this with a metaphor. Robert Clive was seen as Jeff Thompson, and Indians would shiver when they would play cricket. And when they saw Imran Khan, they felt it was Aurangzeb. That is broken. That is number one. Number two, very important, is a lot of Indianness, Indian science, Indian art, etc., is slowly coming up, and people are talking about our heroes of the past in a manner which is very aggressive. I agree with Sanjay, but the point is, it has started. Civilizational awakening is something you can't stop, but civilizational narcissism is bad. Civilizational doubt leads to inferiority, but what is very important is we need to be awakened, but at the same time accept that the world is also doing great things, integrate that into our past. After 9/11, there were many attacks by Al-Qaeda. America could not stop them. They could get Mr. Osama after 10 years. So this is going to be a perennial problem. The world has to come together. India has to join forces so that we stop terrorism across the world.
Yeah, I think we have to be realistic about that. I'm closing a question first to you, Vice Admiral Luthra, that you mentioned this when we were having a conversation before this interview, that in a way we've also tested our capabilities and we've also been able to sort of gauge the enemy's ability. What is your comment on that? What have we gathered? What are our learnings?
Good question.
Our learnings and how do we go forward?
Yeah. And how do we go forward? Sure.
See, as I mentioned, our learnings, we have opened up the space. Now, how do we go forward from here? You see, India has talked about, the Prime Minister has talked about the new normal. There is now, people are increasingly using the term Sindoor Doctrine. It's already being referred to as Sindoor Doctrine. So what is this new normal? If you look at the statements that have come out from the Indian leadership, what is the new normal? The new normal is one, that in case of a terrorist strike, strong retaliation is guaranteed and assured. That is number one. Second part of this new normal is that this retaliation or response will start at a much higher level as far as escalatory ladder is concerned. The starting point will be much higher than it used to be before. That is second part. The third part is that this will happen notwithstanding, or it will completely ignore Pakistan's nuclear brinkmanship.
No more nuclear
No
threat.
nuclear brinkmanship will be ignored. Next point is that in this new normal, the terrorists and their infrastructure, as well as those supporting terrorism, will be considered as one entity. This has been also made out very clear that there will be no differentiation.
State actors,
Which, if you take this statement a little bit forward, what does it imply? It implies that the targeting pattern will get expanded. Now you can target more, including organizations or bases or something which is supporting or providing cover to the terrorist infrastructure. So you open up more. So essentially, therefore, and then as I mentioned earlier, the new normal also means trying to squeeze under the punishment strategy and under the denials, trying to squeeze Pakistan from all sides and trying to pressurize Pakistan to change its behavior. But the problem, as we all know, is that the problem in all likelihood is going to persist. The problem is unlikely to go away, as was just mentioned, that terrorism, after so many years of Operation Enduring Freedom.
So basically, you cannot lower your guard. That's the biggest
So therefore,
takeaway.
what is the implication? What is the
absolutely.
implication of the new normal? Implication is that the two countries are now locked. Their positions have obviously hardened. Both are claiming success of their deterrence strategies also, other than the operations. But they want to strengthen their deterrence strategies. But both are locked in very hard positions. And the implication is that this will require the country to be on guard, and as far as the military is concerned, it will require alertness to be sustained over prolonged periods. Because to deliver as soon after an incident,
what Dr. Shetty
so you will
said,
need
that
to
you
deliver.
can't have a one-off
And for the military,
prescription. It has to be an ongoing thing.
yeah, but the military will have to be in a military. So the military maintains a high level of alertness, but now it will need to be even higher state of alertness that will go forward. And given the larger point is, given that we have no modus vivendi for working things out with Pakistan at present, there is no way that since we are not on, we have said that talks and terror will not go together. So now there
That's
is,
what I was going to
so
ask.
there is no opening at present to move towards resolution. Everybody has agreed, broadly agreed, that the problem of terrorism and the related problems with Pakistan can best be managed, cannot be resolved. But
That's my last question to Sanjay.
The chronic
and Dr.
problem.
yeah,
Shetty.
so therefore,
It's a chronic problem,
so
yeah.
therefore going forward, it's a tougher situation,
situation.
harder situation.
So I just said,
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
One comment is, like we said, Pakistan would carry out or does carry out these terror activities behind this shield of nuclear threat, right? They used it. Now, do you think part of that is that bluff has been called partly? You feel
Yes, yes, the bluff has been called between 2016, 19 and now. The bluff has been called, and that is why, see, in the nuclear discussion, there is this talk about the threshold or the tripwire. When you reach the tripwire, that is the time, and Pakistan has defined when they would want to go nuclear. It's been indicated by them when they would want to go in the spatial domain, in the military domain, in the economic domain, when they have been hit so hard that they will. But remember that in this, while there is a lot of difference between theory and practice, because in practice humans are involved on both sides, and when humans are involved on both sides, it's a chain reaction of it's action, reaction, counteraction. So that chain continues, and all theory balance, the practical part or the actual implementation part is somewhat different. But yes, the brinkmanship, your question, the brinkmanship part has been called out quite effectively so far.
Yeah, I want to ask Sanjay about talks. Now, Prime Minister Modi is very clear, no talks with terror, no water will flow with the blood flow. Can we stick on with this? Is the ceasefire then fragile? Will it hold on? If we are determined never to get onto the negotiating table, as Vice Admiral Luthra is also saying, how will we resolve the pesky issues? I mean, every time, can it only be pegged on our military preparedness?
Oh, very, very valid question. I mean, before I answer that, I want to throw one other issue that we did not get time to probably talk about. It'll require a whole show. But this conflict had a big player that nobody talked about, but that was China. And that, in a great number of ways, can make a future conflict with Pakistan into an unofficial two-front war, because if Pakistan has access to some very sophisticated AI-driven military equipment, whether it's missiles or jets, it just makes it extremely combative. But to answer your question, I think I heard Mr. Modi's speech, and he said that any future act of terror will be deemed as any terror attack will be deemed as an act of war. I think every past prime minister has said something similar. The risk that you have is that in that case, very often you play into the hands of the terrorists in Pakistan, because to engineer a conflict between India and Pakistan then will become like a regular season change of a TV serial. Because what stops Pakistan from, or some kind of, I mean, somebody will just do deliberate provocation, and as we all have said very practically speaking, that your best deterrence therefore is great security architecture and foolproof intelligence to the best extent that you can. But they cannot hold 100% guarantee no matter how good you are. So I feel that this whole decision to put talks in some kind of a frozen turbulence, no conversation, it in the long term, I think I don't think works. Because like it or not, if the, today the DGMOs have their conversation, but at a time where there's a conflict, frankly, the heads of state have to be there to calm the temperatures down, which is why a Donald Trump is very happy to play that role. And I think it's not in the interest of India in particular. We are a robust economy. We have a democracy. We have many features in our country that make us stand out, right? We are the only G20 country from this entire regional bloc. And we need to look at it from a far-sighted perspective. So let me try and be a bit of a devil's advocate here. I do feel that, yes, terror is going to be a threat, and the way to stop Pakistan will always tell you that's a non-state actor. We are not sponsoring that. They even denied 26/11. They will continue to do that. They will try and keep it under boil. And yet, and this is as they say, you can't choose your neighbor, right? Our reality is that we got to live and manage this contradiction. Now, this is where you need statesmanship, that you manage your security in such a way that you minimize whatever occurrences happen. I know it's hard realpolitik, but you have to manage that. On the other hand, I think, will it make a difference to have people play? We do play cricket with Pakistan in Dubai, right? I'm not saying you play right away.
We are withdrawn from the Asia Cup.
Yeah, but you have to figure out that will it help to engage in a political dialogue? At some point, do we need to realize that, as you mentioned, people to people, you will not find the kind of hostility that politicians will probably augment. If that erodes, then I think we are at a pretty terrible brink. If the people of both those countries want, we become into a bloodlust mode,
I think
that is not going to be a
we
healthy
saw a bit
sign.
of it happening this
Yeah,
time.
exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is a time for statesmanship from our country. Yes, we have bled, but we have to make sure that our own ability to stop these are at another level. But will no talks help? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, but then the problem with that is Kashmir comes into the mix. I think
Yeah,
that is
that's a
why.
whole other
I
discussion.
think there
Yeah.
are three
That's a
things
whole
which are
other
important.
But I just
Across
wa-
the country, we should try and build our country in all aspects. I mean, education, business, etc., and be united. But what is important is the DNA of a large number of people across the world believe that the caliphate has to come, and they are all linked. It's not. We are not fighting Pakistan. We are
fighting that ideology, the terrorist mindset.
And for that, I don't think I don't think one war, two war, you kill people, you unknown gunmen go and kill people. That will not stop anything. What is important is the world has to come and realize stability, peace, and respect is not a job of one country. You can't play one against the other. You have to come together and say that let us all fight the war and the pain, and also educate those DNAs who believe that this is the only way to God, and that is something, it's a bigger fight. Pakistan is just one symptom of the problem.
Yeah. The responsibility of media is humongous. And I feel that, for example, in the initial days after Pahalgam, the kind of animus that was being created against Kashmiris and against Indian Muslims was brazenly unfair. And we all saw how the people of Kashmir came together in protest, hadn't happened before. And to make people appear like fifth columnists, a large part of India's mainstream media did that. That was extremely unfortunate. And I think if we are not able to kind of, there were so many innocent people who died in Pooch recently.
Yes, terrible.
Why are we not talking about that at
course.
all?
Their lives
Yeah.
matter
There's
too.
no conversation, right? And they died on account of Pakistan shelling. And the number of people dead and injured is not even in conversation. And they were not very dissimilar from what happened in Pahalgam. So I think we need to kind of be a lot more of a robust, inclusive country. If we get there, I think, frankly speaking, we'll become a great nation.
Yeah,
I think
we're
I
on the
want to
same page
add.
about that.
I want to add something as far as media is concerned, because you see, information operations is a subject in the military by itself, and incorporation of information operations in a war or warlike situation or operation is of paramount importance. Now, I think quite a few lessons have been learned as far as our media is concerned, and I hope they lead to something more positive.
Yeah, let me conclude with that. What I gathered from this conversation is, yes, military preparedness, yes, We have to understand from the current circumstances where we stand and also build our relations with countries that matter and become that regional superpower which Sanjay says that, we have scope here. And let's not jump the gun. I think that is one big takeaway. Anything that you want to add to
Staying
that?
united within, being more inclusive, being united is very, very crucial for India at this point.
Yeah, because that is exactly what they're playing into,
Yeah.
the fault lines within our society.
and
right?
and being
We should never
economically
give
strong
them the chance. Yeah.
and addressing our neighborhood, sending delegates to our neighborhood as well.
Right. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you very
Dr.
much.
Harish
It's been
Shetty,
lovely.
Sanjay
Thank
Jha,
you.
and Vice Admiral.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks a lot. It
Thank
was
you,
a
sir.
wonderful, nice meeting you.
Thank
Sanjay.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Very
you.
good.